understand the mystery. First take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So join us now in Church Chatter.
Welcome to the Church Chatter podcast, where we unpack a different church word or phrase each episode. I'm Sam. I study language and power.
And I'm Dillon, an ELCA Lutheran pastor.
And we always like to start by asking, what have you been giving your attention to recently? Because I tend to believe that's the only thing we have control over, where we put our attention. So Dillon, where have you been putting your attention?
Our nation's 250th birthday.
How do you feel about that?
I feel both proud as being someone from the United States, thinking historically what the founders did over 250 years ago. And yet I have a little trepidation sometimes in where our country is going, and also what our country has also done in the past to certain groups of people and individuals. So like with many things, I try to bring in the both and both include and transcend. I think it's good. I think it's good to wrap our minds around and celebrate the 250th birthday of our nation. I think that's important.
It makes me think of something Father Richard Rohr said, which is that which cannot be critiqued will become evil.
Yeah.
I feel like the things we critique are the things that we care about. Otherwise, why would we critique them? And sometimes patriotism gets hijacked by a certain kind of American who doesn't want the productive critique and is just like, America's great.
Mm-hmm.
But we can hold paradoxical truths that even the founding was some beautiful principles and a lot of evil wrapped up in there too.
Yeah, so we were out this week, and as I was sitting at the restaurant that we were at, I was watching a group of people putting up flags, American flags, and patriotic bunting for Memorial Day, but also for the 250th birthday. And there was something that kind of brought festivity to me in that. It was a local firehouse that was doing it. And taking pride in loving one's nation, and I probably don't agree with all of those things that maybe certain individuals feel, but there was something that was like, oh, this is exciting. This is a big deal, and so holding both things together. So I've been trying my best. Yeah, that's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, that's good.
What have you been thinking about?
Mostly I've been paying attention to the fact that my book comes out in September and I have some book events and podcasts and how different it is to write a book. I mean, the great cosmic joke of being an author is many authors write because we want to work through things by ourselves.
Yeah.
And then in order to publish a book, you have to go around and talk about what you already wrote about. And my impulse is like, just go read it. But of course, you have to talk about it to see if people even want to spend the time reading it. So to transfer some of what I have wrote into a speakable format, those are two very different things. So that's what I've been doing, as you know, for a few weeks, is trying to figure out like, what are the exciting parts, what's interesting, and how can I distill that into like 30 minutes of content of like, here you go. So that's what I've been giving my attention to.
Yeah, sure. That's something good to give your attention to, though. And it's a great book.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. So this is episode 76. We're talking about the word pagan, all wrapped up. It's about colonialism, imperialism, power, right? So I want to talk about this word pagan. I want to talk about it from the time after Jesus was killed and then up until the formation of Christianity and today. So that like I want to kind of walk through the evolution of it. Do you have anything you want to add as like an introduction? You want to just back and forth? I don't know what you have planned for this episode, but I have kind of a linear timeline.
I would just say that it's important to remember that as we talk, I actually don't know anything that Samantha's going to say for this
I
episode.
don't know what you're going to say.
She has no idea what I'm going to say. But I would I don't want to say caution because that sounds kind of negative, but I would caution our listeners to kind of have an open mind as we talk about the word pagan, in that all forms of religions, plural, and all philosophies, also plural, all come from a mix match of different things over time. Nothing is, I would argue that nothing is pure,
Yeah.
quote unquote. And so, as soon as you start with thinking that there's a purity in your group or somebody else's group, you might as well just stop right there.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
so that would be my kind of disclaimer for this episode.
That's a good way to start because I think with pagan, we think it's like that is pagan, this is Christian, and
Right.
there's a boundary around it
Yeah.
all, but that is not at all true.
No, you got it
So
all wrong. Yeah.
let's start with the word pagan. It comes to us from Latin, and it originally just meant villager or country dweller, which actually makes sense, right? So if you think about in the early centuries after Jesus was killed, Jesus followers called non-Jesus followers pagans. And this makes sense because Christianity, I don't even want to call it Christianity because it wasn't Christianity yet, right? But the communities of Jesus followers that were taking form, it was becoming popular in urban parts of the Roman Empire first. The rural or countryside of the empire held tight to tradition and they resisted this new hot thing called it was called the way, it was called a lot of things, right? But Christianity, it wasn't Christianity yet, but Christianity is what we've come to know it as. And that makes sense. That's how it works now too, right? Change begins in the city where it's more diverse, where there's a lot of hustle and bustle. And the more rural parts of our nation, for example, in the United States, they are slower to change. They hold on to tradition, right? So pagan meant country dweller or villager because it was somebody who didn't live in urban parts of the Roman Empire and they were slow to adapt this Jesus movement, right? So we can see the connection here between the country dwellers, the pagans, and those who did not buy into the Jesus movement. So it's similar today, right? Rural areas are slower to shift to new things, and the Jesus movement was a new thing.
Yeah, and I also think it's very important to kind of enunciate that today, many people, when they think about Christianity as we know it of today, they think of people who are kind of country folk, who kind of live out. Yeah,
It's flipped. It just flipped. Yeah.
totally flipped. They think of the little country church that's sitting on the hill in some small village, people who are backwards and kind of believe weird things, people that live not in towns or cities, but live kind of far off in kind of farming country. So what people think of now about Christianity generally, I'm not, there's many people that don't think that about Christianity, but the kind of the general thought about Christianity is rural, country, farming, backwoods people, small, quaint churches. In the early days of the Jesus movement, that was not the case at all. It was a deeply, deeply urban movement.
Right. Pagan didn't just mean a non-Jesus follower, it meant a country dweller. And then you can see how around the 4th century, whenever Christianity merged with the Roman imperial empire, right, because of Constantine, pagans started to become this standard label that Christian use for followers, like not followers of Jesus. In other words, traditional polytheistic religions, right?
Right.
And so we had this pagan label in early Christianity, like formal Christianity after Constantine. The early Christian writings use this word pagan to generally mean the people who were worshiping the traditional gods of Rome or Greece because they tended to live in rural areas. They were the country dwellers or the villagers. And the followers of local indigenous religions were called pagans, and really just anybody outside of Christianity and Judaism, which again, there wasn't like a line. At first, Judaism, If you were a follower of Jesus, even if you were a Gentile, even if you were a non-Jew, you were worshiping the Jewish God. You were under the umbrella of Israel at that point. And then later on, it became, this is Jew, this is Christianity, and there's Messianic Jews now, which is kind of that like in between. I don't know if I want to say in between, but that other category. But it wasn't black and white in the beginning. But pagan was just anybody who was outside of Christianity and Judaism. And this term, it started out neutral, right? Of just like, you live in the country, you worship many gods, you're a pagan. But then, especially after the 4th century, this term, it implied a group who was considered spiritually wrong, morally corrupt, idolatrous, because there were many gods, there were images, right? These things that Christians didn't do. And the term, it was not neutral anymore. It had a growing negative connotation attached to it. And I do want to just talk about, because for me, I had to parcel this out. Pagan versus Gentile. So the Bible uses a lot of words like Gentile, pagan, heathen. And sometimes it just vaguely uses this term nations. It just says nations, right? When they're talking about these groups. Gentile meant non-Jewish people. Do you want to add to that at all? Keep it simple.
No, not necessarily.
And pagan became associated with specifically polytheistic or non-Christian religions.
And also non-Jewish.
And non-Jewish, yeah. So, I mean, specifically polytheistic, because Judaism and Christianity notoriously throughout history have been monotheistic. There's one God. So paganism became you worship many gods. And that's still the connotation today for the most part. And pagan, so you have all of that history, and it became really a negative connotation. And then you see pagan practices in Christianity start to pop up. So Christianity extended through Europe, and a lot of local customs were reinterpreted by this new Christian movement sweeping through the continent, right? It's called Christian imperialism, right? Christians were like, we are going to spread. We're going to be this new huge thing. We're going to be global. We're going to be universal. And we now know, because hindsight is 2020, that has done a lot of harm. Arguably more harm than good. That's been debated. It'll always be debated. But then you get winter festivals connected to Christmas, right? That's pagan winter festivals connected to Christmas. You get spring fertility imagery connected to paganism, and they kind of merge with Easter traditions. So paganism and Christianity start to hold hands. And we don't always like to talk about that. A lot of people who use this word pagan negatively, they don't realize how much our Christian practice has been influenced by paganism.
You also have a rather large one too in the remembrance of the dead or the faithful departed. Pagan quote unquote pagan religions or groups always had a tradition of honoring the dead, which also Judaism had, but it was at a certain time of year, and Christians in the early days used to honor the dead in the spring, believing that they would resurrect into something new. But as the movement grew and kind of expanded, especially westward, you started having these celebrations not at the spring time, but you would have them in the fall. So so the idea of well, the earth is dying, we should remember at this time that people also die. And so that comes from a kind of I don't want to call it borrowed, but kind of a borrowed pagan understanding.
Yeah, and I feel like people, whenever they hear that, sometimes people take it to the extreme and they want to separate those things. Like, well, I'm not going to celebrate Christmas then. Or you'll have Christians take that point of view back to your original point, which is they want to make it pure again. To that, I say there is one way, and that is forward. You cannot go back.
Yeah.
Stop trying to go back to what once was. You cannot separate that which has been merged now. You just can't go back. Go ahead.
And you did. So I think actually even many very faithful and devout Christians these days, if you don't know anything or have not read anything about church history, even in our own country in the United States in the very early days, you had the group of the called the Puritans,
Hmm.
and the Puritans outlawed Christmas and Easter, believing them to be pagan, and not following them at all, not allowing public celebrations of them, not celebrating them as kind of festival days in the church. So you
And a lot of so Puritans in their pure form don't exist anymore. But I was just talking to somebody about this recently. Puritans, that's an interesting, controversial historical topic to talk about. We should have a whole episode just on Puritans.
we should. I
But
find that fascinating.
the more I learn about them, the more I'm not a fan.
Oh, they're
But
nasty.
yeah, they're tough. However, they've taken new form, and actually, a lot of evangelical communities have inherited a lot of Puritan practices. And this is not main. This is not. I'm not speaking for all evangelicalism here, but a lot of evangelical groups do this kind of stuff. They're like, oh no, we can't celebrate that because they're trying to get back to this pure thing. Which again,
So
you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater here when you do that.
I got to give an anecdotal story here. My parents for a span of time when I was younger tried out different churches, and we went to different churches, and I have a younger brother, for those who don't know that. And we went to a different church on Easter Day, for Easter Sunday. And I'll never forget, my brother tells the story much better than me, but we said to the greeters, we said, "Oh, happy Easter." And the greeter said back to my brother, "It's not Easter, it's Resurrection Sunday." And we both kind of looked at each other like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I mean, what's going on, right? And the idea was, this person actually put. We clearly never went back to this church again. But they pulled my brother aside. I was there too, but they were speaking directly to him, and went into this kind of whole weird, like, Easter is pagan, and it's Resurrection Sunday. So if you think that churches like that don't exist, they do.
But it's interesting because just changing it to Resurrection Sunday doesn't change the
Oh,
pagan influence.
oh, sure,
Calendar is
sure,
pagan,
of course,
right?
of
Like,
course,
yeah, that's so
of
interesting.
course.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about colonialism then and like medieval time as well. So during the Middle Ages and the colonial periods, Christians used this pagan term. It started to kind of expand, right? For many groups that were different from them. So African traditional religions, Norse religions, Celtic, Slavic, and any non-Christian spirituality. And there continues to be, this is why I take it. I don't use this word casually. I hear a lot of people throw this word around like it's a bad word. I also hear a lot of non Christians reclaiming this word for themselves as kind of like their own anti Christian movement of like, I'm a pagan. I am okay with pagan stuff. Um, there's this assumption in this word, pagan, of cultural and religious superiority
Mhm.
that I just try to stay away from. This idea that Christianity is the best, we're the one true path, like all of that. And it's tied to, I mean, Dylan, I think that we're on the same page generally. I'm against foreign mission trips, I'm against them. I don't ever, the Christian superiority savior complex, I'm not interested in that. I think it's done way more harm than good. I think there's a lot of data to support that. But this idea of like there's pagans and then there's Christians and we're better, it's tied to missionary and imperial projects, right? Which brings us into today in scholarship and academic discourse. This term pagan, it's often used as a theological or historical label, and in more popular culture, it's still used very derogatorily for non-Christian groups. It's not just like a that's what they are and that's what we are. It's used as a you are less than. Pagan is a problem. I don't know that I've ever heard the word pagan out in the wild casually or neutrally. It always has a negative connotation, or it's somebody trying to reclaim it and they view Christianity in a negative way, right? There's like this back and forth ping pong. Um,
Yeah.
so there's this reclaiming of it. And now, so people are, a lot of earth centered spiritualities claim this pagan identity. So my point is, because I study language and power, this term pagan, it's all about power. It's a word that simply meant villager, and it became this religious category, and it was used by an expanding empire aligned with Christianity to distinguish insiders from outsiders. And that transformation is one of the reasons that scholars of religion and scholars of empire, they study the term extensively, because it's so connected to colonialism and imperialism and power, and it's still very relevant today. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
totally do. Yeah, another huge thing with kind of like ridding oneself, or like a group of like paganism or paganistic practices. Well, this was also a huge thing during the Protestant Reformation. Many of the Protestant reformers believed that the medieval the medieval Catholic Church kind of was falling into kind of paganistic practices, that they were they were more concerned with pagan practices and rituals than they were the actual teachings of the Bible, or the kind of living like a Christ-like life. And the reformers, most of which, even Martin Luther, who is a kind of a pillar, obviously in the church that Samantha and I are in the Lutheran Church. It's interesting because the medieval church was so entrenched in what was called superstitionism. And superstitionism, or superstitionists, believed in what's called relicism. And they were they were trinkets or toys or relics that people would collect, believing that they would bring them good luck, or they would bring them hope, or something like that. And the medieval church was, I mean, pretty much that's pretty much what they were promoting. And it was it kind of became a kind of a what they call a folk religion. And so people were illiterate. Most of the people were illiterate, but they would have these kind of tangible things to hold on to or to look to, and they focused more on those. Well, here's the interesting thing about that. Those quote unquote pagan practices, or pagan relics, or kind of superstitions, people could get on board with because they were close to them and they could connect with them, right? And then this is going to sound like I'm beating up on the Protestant reformers, and I'm not. But one of the things that I think we forget about is most of the Protestant reformers, if not almost all of them, were very well educated men, most of which were part of the clergy. And so they could read in multiple languages. They had a very extensive portfolio of.
And Martin Luther, he was a pastor as well.
Right.
He was an Old Testament pastor.
Right. He was an Old Testament professor. So they were very well skilled people. So what they were saying is, enough with the superstition paganist stuff.
Mhm.
Let's have people be more literate so that they can learn the actual stories of Jesus and know the actual stories of Jesus. Let's have them sing hymns in their own language so they know what they're talking about, and not have type of rabbit's foot things hanging from their kitchen thinking that they're going to help them, right?
Okay, but this is actually so wrapped up in literacy. Go ahead.
Right. So, right. And so I'm bringing it up because there's elite people are telling people who are not so elite, this is what you should do.
Mhm.
This is what you should do. So that's not necessarily bad or wrong or problematic, but it's somebody from on high.
Yeah, a man.
A man telling kind of the masses, meaning groups of people I'm talking about, that you're doing it all wrong and you don't get it. And I'm going to teach you because I know, because I have a lead. And again, this sounds like I'm picking on the reformers, but it's important for this conversation in paganism because you have to kind of balance this out. I think many of the reformers were wanted people to truly understand the beauty of the Christian faith, and at the same time, they took away practices that many people could get around their minds because they couldn't read, because you know what I mean?
But here's the thing though. So historically, so our left brain is very I don't want to get this mixed up. Our right brain is creative. It is the part of our brain that is culturally feminine, right? We've decided that culturally feminine things, Dillon and I have talked about this before, but it's important here. So culturally feminine things are connected with the left brain. And obviously this is a lot of generalization here, but our left brain is responsible for creativity, holistic thinking, being artistic, metaphor, images. That's the feminine part, right? Again, culturally. And then that's our right brain. Our left brain is logical, rational. It's the part of our brain that is most active with language, but literal language. And that's the part that has been deemed masculine. And historically, around the time that the alphabet, the written word, was created, that is the time when goddess worship went away, which is interesting. So you have, and a lot of people connect this to the rise of patriarchy, because whenever you see us become a literate society, and it happens quickly, right? We become literate. What happens is the part of our brain that is literal, rational, all of these things, which are good, but all of that becomes culturally valued and also biologically. I mean, we take our children to the doctors, and what do they ask? Can they pronounce sounds? Can they recognize letters? Like all of the developmental questions are literacy questions. Not all, but most of them, right? Literacy has become, and I study it, I think reading and writing is so important, but it has a shadow side, right? Because what happened was a long, long time ago, many tens of thousands of years ago, you have this written word, you have the metaphor part of our brain, the feminine part goes away, and we stop with the polytheistic stuff. We stop with the worship of goddess. Women are now a metaphor and images. They are all devalued, while rationality, and then you get the Enlightenment, all like it all domino effects. You get the Protestant Reformation, which is very masculine, very heady, very anti-image in a lot of ways, right? So it's all tied together. It's all tied together. So interesting.
Yeah, and so in terms of like the Protestant Reformation and the Protestant Reformers, I think they thought, and in many ways I think they did do a good job in helping people with literacy in terms of reading and getting things in people's own language. And I'm not discounting that. I mean, I'm a Protestant Lutheran pastor. I mean,
Everything has a shadow side.
you know, but at the same time, you can still have those things and not I'm not suggesting people put their faith in rabbit's foot ritual superstitionism. That's not what I'm promoting at all. But what I'm saying is there is power in ritual, and we see that. Let me just emphasize this: we see that in the if you're a Christian or a Jesus follower, we see that in the Jesus story itself. In particular, I'm thinking right off the top of my head here, the Palm Sunday story of throwing people's cloaks and throwing branches, leafy branches, and saying Hosanna in the highest. All these things, those cloaks and those branches, we've talked about this on other episodes, those are symbols. Not only are they symbols, but they are real things. I think of, like, you go to church on Palm Sunday and you come home with palms. Those things matter.
I don't think it's an accident that the denominations that tend to lift up women and allow, I don't even want to say allow, but like women can be pastors and leaders as much as, yes, thank you, affirm. The very denominations that affirm women in all roles, just like men, are the denominations that tend to be liturgical, because they lift up metaphor, they lift up embodied worship, they lift up images connected, right? Because that's a human experience. All of those things matter. And it's interesting that generally speaking, the churches that don't want women to have leadership roles, you enter the church, there is no historical traditional liturgy. You go in, you sit on a fold out chair, and you listen to essentially a lecture or a sermon for 45 minutes. You sing some music and you leave. It's a very heady experience.
And mostly from a white straight male.
Right. It's all very masculine. But what's interesting is you also do get a lot of emotion in those spaces, right? So I don't want to deny that either. But I think it's no coincidence that the metaphor that has been preserved are the very Christian groups where the feminine aspects have also been preserved and affirmed, right? That's all really interesting. Anyway, Pagan, anything else to add?
No, I would just say think twice before you call somebody a pagan and realize that I'm sure in your own life, in my own life, there's things that we're doing all the time that have come from many, many different traditions in times past. And and some of them are quite beautiful and they can be embraced.
I even think, I sometimes wonder, I can't tap into this, but I wonder how Judaism feels about Christianity because we took a lot of their stuff and merged it, and you know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
we did it too. Nothing exists this is not a hot take, but nothing exists in a vacuum. And especially I just think about our world and how global it is. You can't possibly expect your tradition to stay pure, and that's just rolling a boulder up a hill. I mean, what are you doing? That's
Mhm.
exhausting. It's not possible. Just let it evolve as it is and understand that other people, other communities, other traditions are going to touch yours. It gets tricky. I don't even think we have the time to talk about assimilation right now. And I mean, that's tricky. But we all do it. Christianity did it with Judaism. We took Jewish practices and we made it our own. Paganism has also touched Christianity and vice versa.
Right.
Fascinating. All right, stay curious.
Stay curious.
To understand the mystery, first take a look at the history. The words we use will give us clues. So